And at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Peter Abbarno.
And I'm going to grab the gavel, too, but no. So I want to thank everyone for coming for this workshop on homelessness and poverty and all the issues that surround it. By the number of people who are here, then they probably agree with us up here that this is a top issue, not only in our community, but throughout Lewis County and really throughout the state of Washington. We have a 1-hour workshop. That doesn't mean we're going to kick you out at 7 o'clock, but we'll probably end the workshop at 7, and then many folks will stick around and talk. Homelessness is homelessness is the result of many causes. I think we all recognize that. Substance abuse, mental illness, traumatic experiences, loss of a job, all of these things are involved with the result of homelessness. And that's why it makes it so difficult to find solutions. But it also makes it imperative that we work together, because solving these issues cannot be done in a vacuum. We need to cooperate, communicate, and collaborate with everybody in our community. And the statutes from the state, RCW 43, gives the county kind of the authority as the entity, the lead entity that comes up with a 5-year plan, and there's some funding mechanisms to that. And part of this workshop, and we're not going to solve it today, but part of this workshop is to find out what the county is doing, how we can help the county, how cities, organizations, and individuals in our community fit within the plan, and to move on from merely talking about these issues and start working on some action plans. I appreciate the United Way has been a leader in this for years. Debbie's here for a number of years, has brought organizations together to talk about it. And now I think it's time to bring it out to the public and start taking some action on it. And so with that, I want to turn it over to the county. Eric Martin and J.P. Anderson are here with the county. And what I did ask, because there were about 2 or 3 people who mentioned this to me before, would JP talk about COVID-19 and coronavirus real quick and give us an update? So, although that's not on the agenda, we're going to let JP give us a little bit of an update on that before he goes into the county's presentation on the homelessness plans.
Thanks, Peter. Obviously been having a lot of conversations around coronavirus, and understandably a lot of people are concerned. What we're really trying to do right now is just share a message around general hygiene and how important that is in addressing something like this. So washing your hands, cough in your elbow, and stay home if you're sick is really the primary message. I think that as testing ramps up in our state and in our nation, we're going to hear about more cases. And that's to be expected, and that's not something to panic over or to overreact to. The same common sense approaches on communicable diseases in general and just kind of good hygiene are going to be our best bet going forward. And so really just a message for people to stay calm, know that just because you're coming down with might be a common cold or even a common flu, if you feel like you're able to manage that, that's great. And to stay home, if you feel like you're really not getting better as you would expect, or if your fever's not going away, it is important that you do call your healthcare provider at that point, and it's important that you call first. That's a helpful step. So that's the one piece of messaging around that additionally, and that's really all I've got to say about that. We'll have more as we know more, and obviously as a public health director, we're staying very involved on that issue.
Thank you.
So, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll just start off real quick. JP's going to do most of the talking tonight, but I did just want to say thank you to the Centralia City Council for having us here tonight. I think this is a really important issue, and I think the City of Centralia definitely has a lot of this issue within your city limits, and so we're happy to come here tonight, talk to you a little bit about some of the planning that we've done, but I think even more importantly, I think the county commissioners has directed myself and JP here to make sure that as we do whatever we can to work on this issue, that we really hear from the people of our community. And so that's a big part of why we're here tonight. We want to hear from the council. We want to hear from the public here in Centralia. We've got some kind of specific directed questions that we want to ask. And so, that's a big part of what we're out here doing. We've met with some other individuals in the community who have concerns about this issue, and we want to continue to do that so that whatever decisions that the county eventually has to make, that they reflect those values of who we are here in Lewis County, including the cities within the county. So, with that being said, I will turn it over to JP to go into the presentation.
Great. So Mija Hanlon, who many of you may know, she's on the Centralia Downtown Association and very involved with things in Centralia. She developed this PowerPoint, and until a few hours ago, she was going to be presenting it. But unfortunately, she was not able to come tonight to do that. And so I'm going to be going through that. I'll be using her notes, and I'm going to try to move through it fairly quickly. So hopefully we can get to conversation and get to kind of the next step, hopefully. So the first couple pages on here are slides are just terminology, and I'm happy to walk through those if that's something you guys would like. I'm also happy to kind of leave those for people to read or to kind of read for themselves. I don't want to give anyone death by PowerPoint, and reading directly from a script is not the most fun. So I guess just looking at those: chronically homeless, literally homeless, imminent risk. Do you guys feel like it'd be helpful to go through those for me, or just keep going? Okay. There are things that you may hear about as we go forward more, and so they're good terms to know.
Can I just, so when you're talking terminology, is that terminology from the state or terminology from the federal government? Because I know the differences on homelessness are defined differently by the two entities.
Right. So these are terms that we'll use, which are guided by the state through the Department of Commerce. And as I kind of get done with the terminology, as you see here now, you can see where our funding comes from. And so the red line there, and I'm going to pull the number up here. It's not on the actual slide, but it's on the notes, and can send that along to anyone. So the DOC, Department of Commerce allocation, is $741,000 for this coming year. And 529, which is the blue line there, is Lewis County. Those are local document and recording fees. And so that's revenue that's generated inside Lewis County at the time of someone filing a real estate transaction at the county auditor's office. We get that money, and that rate is set by the legislature, and that rate is set at around $90 for a lot of those documents. It comes in several different small pieces, and over the last 12 years or so, that's changed by the legislature how much that is, but that's how much we get. It's often referred to as 2163 because that's the House bill that authorized it. The other number there in yellow comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and we get $151,000 for that, and that is federal HUD money, also known as McKinney-Vento money. That is used to support families who are homeless, so families with children who are homeless. The next slide looks exactly at the RCW that really tells us that it's our job to do this work. And as you can see, each local homeless housing task force, which we use our Public Health and Social Service Advisory Board in that capacity, prepare and recommend to its local government legislative authority, our Board of County Commissioners, a 5-year homeless housing plan for its jurisdictional area. That's our entire county, which shall be not inconsistent. That's a great word, right? Could just call it consistent with the department's statewide guidelines issued December 1st, 2019, and thereafter the department's 5-year homeless housing strategic plan, which shall be aimed at eliminating homelessness. I think there's one typo there, and that should be December 1st, 2018, when those were first given to us in that RCW. So that's why we're here, and that's why, as you said, we're doing this role. One of the handouts we've got here, and I think we printed 30, and if there's a way to make more if people want them, is a copy of our 5-year plan. So we had an open process for that. We tried to advertise that. We did have about 35 individuals show up to provide input to that at the county last spring as we were working on it. And then after that, we worked closely with the Department of Commerce and with the consulting firm that they hired to guide us to ensure that the plan that we developed would be eventually approved, therefore being not inconsistent with their guidelines. So here you'll see kind of what are the 5 key components, and these were all things that we talked with and learned from the Department of Commerce were really going to be required to be in there. Quickly identify and engage people experiencing homelessness. So you hear sometimes about coordinated entry. Excuse me, that's going to be the next one. That's going to be all about quickly identifying, engaging people experiencing homelessness. That's all about our outcomes. So we want to see that we're finding who is homeless and we're serving them quickly. Number 2, prioritize housing for people with the greatest need. We have what's called a coordinated entry system, and we can talk about that quite a bit. But what that tells us to do is to essentially have a no wrong door strategy in the county, and to, when someone comes in and identifies themselves as homeless, to do an assessment and to evaluate what their vulnerability index, or how likely are they to stay homeless if not served. And so what we do with our partners who deliver these services, again, we're contracting these services out to community partners. What we're doing in prioritizing the people at the highest level need is we're making sure that the service they're getting meets their level of need. Number 3 there, operate an effective and efficient homeless crisis response system that swiftly moves people into stable, permanent housing. That's outcome-based. We want to see how many exits into permanent housing happened. And so that really makes sense. Project the impact of fully implemented local plan on the number of households housed and the number of households left unsheltered, assuming existing resources and state policies. So they want to know, where were we at when we started this, and where are we going to be at when we're done? I think oftentimes there's this frustration for people in the system trying to solve these problems, and definitely for people that are outside the system saying, wait, we're spending more money. It's not getting better. How is this so? And so they're really wanting us to identify, where are you at now? And when you do this, where are you going to be at? And then number 5, address racial disparities among people experiencing homelessness. For us here in our area, we found it's really important to have services in English and Spanish. And to make sure that we're doing things in an appropriate way. We also have a very robust grievance system. If anyone's ever concerned about those services, I'm happy to share. Those are not calls that we get often, and if we do, they're often remediated very quickly. So that's a bit about our 5-year plan, just a real overview. The next piece is the 2020 RFP. So last Friday, we put out our RFP, which will be starting January 1 of this year and go for 12 months. And it's important to kind of understand how we conceive that work and kind of where we're at now by looking at the projects we've funded in the last year, or this year, I should say, for the first half. So as you see here, we've got a pie chart, and we've got some different descriptions there. They're not complete words, so I'll fill it out for you. The red there, if we start with CHG, those are the state dollars. And so CHG is the Consolidated Housing Grant that comes from Commerce, and it has very specific guidelines for how we spend those dollars. We get a very specific budget for them based on the calculations that they make on our population and what our needs are. And so that's how we choose how those dollars are spent. You can see that. So Housing Resource Center receives $138,000 of that, and I'm just going to walk through these as they are. Excuse me. I'm going to go back to CHG. The Housing Resource Center on those funds receives $86,000. Reliable Enterprises receives $34,000, and Hope Alliance receives, I can talk about what each of these are for as well. Hope Alliance receives $59. Salvation Army receives $68. And the last one there, $37, is us. That's how much we take from that to administer these grants. The next one there in our local funds is the Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington. So often you hear, well, who's the housing authority? Our housing authority is the Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington out of Cowlitz. They get $13,000, and essentially what they do for us is they administer our tenant-based rental assistance program, TBRA. So when you think of transitional housing, that's where you get a 2-year voucher. Someone who qualifies for that, those are prized tickets for people that are looking to get into houses. And what we found is, now that we can get people with a TBRA ticket, the hard part is finding a place where they can use it, finding a landlord that will take that $800 a month. I'm not sure if that's exactly the amount right now. I think it's pretty close, and will do that. So we found that the limiting factor isn't necessarily always the voucher, it's the actual place to live. Just an aside on that. We also spend 138,000 of those local dollars to HRC. They're doing case management services, and they're doing diversion services, so working with people who are about to become homeless if we don't do something else. We don't support them. And Community Action Council also does diversion services. So they're helping people with providing rental assistance and things to keep them from becoming homeless. One thing to keep in mind is when someone becomes homeless and the pieces start to really fall apart in their life, the work to get them back on track and in a house is incredibly difficult and made much more hard. So if you can hear that they've got an eviction notice and you can start to work with them and their landlord to try to remediate that situation, you're going to get much more value for your dollar as a purchaser of these services, and you're going to have better outcomes. The Salvation Army gets $96,000. They are doing they're doing diversion. We've got everyone doing diversion. That's a intervention we really believe in. And that's helping to pay for some of their day shelter facilities. The Centralia School District is the only school district currently that's getting this position because of the amount of homeless students that they've got in that school district. We have worked with them to develop an additional 1 FTE position, not just to do the McKinney-Vento programs that come from the federal government, but also to do these case management services that families need and kind of help them overcome and problem solve ways to get back on their feet. Hub City Mission, you see there, we give some money to, $16,500. That helps pay for their volunteer coordinator. That is a miraculous program when you think of the level of services that are being provided, the level of bed nights that are being provided, and the gap that fills in our community. As someone that thinks of it in contractual terms, it's nothing short of miraculous what is accomplished there. Lewis County Gospel Mission, also a day shelter in our community, gets some funds from our local dollars for some of the hygiene services they provide. And then Hope Alliance, again, they're doing some rental diversion, and they're our domestic violence shelter for Lewis County. So we're spending some of our local dollars on that. Let me know if you need me to go back or slow down, or I'm on a roll here. So
I just want to interject a little bit and just to clarify. So when you're talking about diversion, I mean, diversion is, can you explain that? Is that the philosophy that it's going to be more efficient and cost effective to keep someone in their home than it is to let them go homeless and then get them back, or what?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And, I will say that how we work with our providers, I know Housing Resource Center is here, and our providers, we feel like we have a really shared mindset on how that best functions. Obviously, we want to give people enough funding, and it's generally a very short time span to kind of maybe it's get that one utility bill handled, get them caught up on rent that 1 month, and make sure diversion's about solving the immediate issue, but not creating a system where you're paying rent in an ongoing way. So what you're working to do in those case management services is what is really a sustainable plan, and let's help people with those dollars build sustainable plans so they can stay permanently housed. So that's kind of a short, intense service, and it is to keep people from becoming homeless. And I would say that we do that better in Lewis County than anywhere else I've heard of, as far as how many people we're able to help with how many dollars we spend.
JP,
yeah.
Is there some sort of a standard for landlords to provide, up to code housing for that $800 voucher? Is there someone overseeing that to make sure they get some decent housing?
Yes. So before that can be approved, a housing case manager does go in and verify that. And, kind of exactly what all those codes are, that's not something I could speak to, but yes, that is part of the process. That being said, there are, for TBRA there are. If you're going to spend that $800, yes, there are. For diversion, we might have a plan where, can you stay on someone's couch? Can you rent here? Can you share? I mean, we can get into very small, detail-oriented case management with the diversion dollars. I misspoke. The TBRA dollars need to go through that process. The diversion dollars, to my knowledge, do not. And that's part of what gives us the flexibility. And part of our success possibly could be that we're able to be very creative with how we help people keep from getting homeless with those dollars in that way. But again, it is intended to be a time-limited service. The next slide here I'm showing I'm sorry, are there any other questions before I go into our next slide? Okay. The next slide here is our 2020 RFP project categories. So, as you can see with the CHG dollars, the main thing they're wanting us to fund is called HEN there, is housing and essential needs. And so that is that rental assistance, that's the money for the rental assistance, as well as essential needs, which could be cleaning products, hygiene products, things that we understand people are going to need in order to stay housed, be successful, hopefully move forward in their life, that they may not have a benefit that covers for them otherwise. It's also connected with DSHS benefits, and so people that are on the Aging and Blind program, they also now qualify for HEN services. So in the last couple of years, we've had a dramatic increase of what people qualify for that, and those dollars are incredibly taxed. And I mean taxed by stressed used, not taxed. That's probably the wrong word in this context. So we will do primarily our money through CHG will be for HEN. We will also do some money for rapid rehousing, and that's where somebody with that higher level need, someone came in with a higher vulnerability, less likely to be able to get housed on their own. Rapid rehousing is about putting those intensive, more expensive services and getting them there. And then CHF is a new program that's going to be starting going forward, which is chronically homeless families. And so those are some additional case management dollars, as I understand, just for families. So those are the state categories. Not as exciting in that we don't get to pick those. The document recording fees, we will be allocating $420,000 out of that this year. Some of those are already accounted for in projects that we will not be going through an RFP process for. And those are, we are very mindful of what we need to RFP out and what we don't. So things like Centralia School District, it doesn't make sense to RFP out because really there's only one person that can provide that, and that's the school district in the school. They need to be connected with the school, we found. They need to understand all the things that the school district will need them to understand and be an employee of the school district. So we'll be RFPing out $420,000 this coming year, and you can see the breakdown there. Again, on the notes provided to me, we can see that it's going to be $110 for shelter. That's a very small amount when you consider the needs that we have. Hygiene will be $15,000. Again, that hygiene will be going to day shelters to help support the Salvation Army and Lewis County Gospel Mission. Prevention, $125. Again, that's similar to diversion. That's preventing people from becoming homeless. And then case management, $80,000. And that's for the staff to do the work just on meeting with someone when they first come in and they're not qualified for any services yet. They still have to sit down and do an intake. All right, so those are the project categories we've picked going forward. So, and Peter, I did that for you, sorry, but now let's talk about it. Very clever. So, it's been a long day. So, how do we envision this happening? I can answer these questions, or we can talk about them.
Well, I mean, why don't you tell us how you would like to see it happen? I mean, I think that we're all going to have different views. I mean, I think for most people, the goal is the same, to find solutions. We may have different ways of getting there, but we're all under certain constraints, and some of it is the Department of Commerce. And we've had this discussion a number of times, the frustrations with the one-size-fits-all plan. A number of times in your presentation, you've talked about local. We do it better than they do. I like hearing that, and because I agree. So, let's talk a little bit about, the county, how you would like to see it work, and maybe even start talking about some of the constraints that we have that we could all maybe start looking at solutions to find.
Great. I worked for Cascade Mental Health Care for about 10 years, and I started working in the jail. And I was the only mental health worker there for a long time. And my job was to do discharge planning. I'm going to take my coat off so I don't start sweat. And I spent a long time working on, how do you help someone that's leaving custody, that's got a criminal record, probably homeless, and have it so they don't come back to jail in the next week. And that sounds like something that might be easy to some, or might be hard to imagine how you could end up back in jail. But I saw people coming back over and over. And I saw them come back ashamed and disappointed. And, man, they were convinced it wasn't going to happen when they left. And it came back. And it happened again. And it happened again. And I watched people lose hope. And I think that how I envision this happening, as in finding solutions, is that oftentimes I would leave work thinking, how can I help these people? And what I found was that I didn't have a way to connect them with a real pathway out. I didn't have a way to say, here's a place you can live. Here's a job you can have. And so I envision this happening by us using just like a client. I think of us as a single unit. What is our strength? And our strength is, when we talk about this, the room fills up. When we open a cold weather shelter and it's volunteer run, it's run well and it's staffed. When we do diversion, we do it better. I think our innate strengths are really strong, and I think that, frankly, our community has overcome issues connected to poverty for a long time and done that silently in a lot of ways. A lot of times, there's a lot of RVs that aren't hooked up right in Lewis County. That's part of our jobs, to find them and deal with them too in public health. But there's a lot of places where people have just figured out how to work around the situation. And so although sometimes that's painful, that's a strength, that we can be creative and we can move quickly. And you can call us in and we can sit down and talk and work on it. So I envision this happening together, and us realizing that some of our challenges have kind of formed our strengths, which is a desire to help in a close-knit community. So we want input, we want involvement. This isn't something we run. We just kind of hold the container and try to bring people in. So that's how I envision it happening. Getting input from you guys, making sure that when we put a committee together to make these decisions, you feel well represented in the room. That's how I envision this happening. And I do think that our faith-based community represents a strength in Lewis County that we absolutely need to tap into, and that needs to feel like a real partner. I think for a long time, it felt like, well, government and faith-based, it's hard for us to work together. I don't think that's the case at all right now. We feel like we're in lockstep and ready to move forward in a lot of ways. And so I think that's a big part of what we do going forward.
So, JP, there's a lot of different philosophies about, housing. So do we build housing first, or do we have the structure for treatment? Because you can buy every homeless person a house today. By tomorrow, you're going to have homelessness. If you don't treat the root causes of homelessness, which is mental health, substance abuse, some of those traumatic experiences with counseling, and if you are going to build housing, do you build it for the most vulnerable or the most amenable? What would you suggest? Not necessarily what the Department of Commerce wants us to do, but what do you think we would need in our community that we could work on?
I think that you need to build programs that reflect the community you're in. And I think that the community of Lewis County has shared, and I think kind of what you're getting at, Peter, and I've heard you talk about this, that a level of accountability is a community value and is an expectation. I think that that is that is, when we develop programs, we want to develop what's called culturally competent programs. So you don't build something for Seattle when you're in Lewis County. You build something for Lewis County. So building that level of accountability into the system, I think, is something we can do and is something we need to do. I think that in doing that, we have to work together very closely, because with accountability must come, that's the opportunity. You give the opportunity and there's accountability connected to it. And so I think that it's not an either or in a lot of situations. We do need to have lots of different approaches. And, you are going to have individuals who are high visibility, high impact, who need a high level of service in order to come off the street and to find recovery. And then, and you need to do that, but you also need to work with people who, with just a little more help, could get that one bill taken care of, could get connected with that program that gets them some clothes to apply for a job and gets connected with the job. And we can't kind of throw one side away for the other. I think that just housing availability, we're at under 1% housing availability in Lewis County. So development, and that leads to infrastructure conversations. And when I think about talking to a city council, I think we're really starting to get into infrastructure conversations if we're going to address homelessness.
Because if we build even multifamily houses, sewer lines, right? Curb, gutter, sidewalk. We've got so many things that we have to deal with that a lot of people don't realize. You can't just build something. I mean, it takes zoning, it takes the infrastructure. Where does that money come from? A lot of times if we have a developer, and Rob can probably comment on this, we have a developer who comes in, you've got latecomer fees, you've got all these other mechanisms to pay for it. Now, I know that you can do some bonds through 1406 money and some of the other ways, but, is there money available through these programs that you've heard about that would even allow us to start building?
As far as the dollars for building and how to best access those, we've been, as a department and myself since coming on, I've worked with Reliable on a couple applications to try to do some affordable housing building. Unfortunately, haven't got any of those housing trust fund dollars to do that. There is one project that goes there that is on Reynolds Road, doing well, really meets a need there. We help provide the case management services to make it successful. But as far as those dollars, that's not something that we've had the luxury of really leaning into figuring out and doing. And one of the things that came up early in our conversation, and Eric can jump in here, but one of the things that came in early in our conversation was, well, our group needs to work on those things. And if public health and social services says, my mission is to make sure we can build enough in Lewis County, that's not the right person to be saying, that's on my to-do list. That needs to be on everyone's to-do list. So appreciate your help in bringing it up. That's a city council issue that you guys, I think, really can add some muscle to and some understanding on those issues.
So my perspective on infrastructure is I sit on the Public Works Board. It's a state board that runs a very sustainable low-interest loan program for infrastructure projects. And we have, as this idea and this conversation in the legislature about housing has become more and more prominent over the last couple of years, we have hit the legislature really hard with, hey, you're missing a piece here. You're missing the infrastructure piece that needs to be a part of this conversation. So we've said, hey, if you want to give the Public Works Board money, we can get it out quickly. We can, lots of projects. In fact, we put out $95 million in 4 weeks in this last August, and the requests we had were close to 300,000 or 300 million. So we could only put out 1/3 of what the actual ask was, and that was just for a limited amount of time. So. But we're not the only entity out there. Department of Ecology has programs. Department of Health has programs. Department of Commerce has programs. All these programs are something that the legislature has not yet kind of wrapped their brain around as a big part of this housing conversation. If you want to put more money into infrastructure, that's going to benefit everyone and really support that housing need out there. And obviously, we have a great need here in Lewis County. So. That's kind of my perspective on the infrastructure side of this housing conversation.
So one of the things we've heard, and we've had citizens come and even testify to us regarding not wanting any more low-income housing. What they're arguing is that they want, and it's a very good argument, is that they want middle class and all types of housing from A to Z, because there's a bottleneck in housing, one. So there's young professionals who maybe could afford to live in our community, but there's nothing available, the less than 1%. But the other aspect is the impact it has on our school system. Is that when you build with such density around certain schools, some of the bonding on the new schools could only build, and it's not Department of Health's problem or Department of Commerce, but only can build to what their expectation is that building year. So is there any discussion out there about building other types of housing to kind of move that bottleneck so that it opens up other housing?
I would imagine there is. I would hope so. What you might need as a city to help support that, and what we might need as a county to help support that. I mean, I guess maybe that's where we start right here, saying, okay, we want to support lots of different kind of housing. How do we do that? I'm not aware of a conversation. We attend the master builders meetings, and we try to kind of bring the information we have into those groups whenever we can. But as far as kind of motivating or directing those groups, they don't necessarily listen to Lewis County Public Health and Social Services on where to build.
They should.
I'll tell them.
Yeah, I think that if there's anything we can do at the county to work with City of Centralia or any other city on urban growth area issues. I mean, I think the Planned Growth Committee has been very active over the last couple of years, trying to find creative solutions within our urban growth areas. That's really where the county can operate and help with those situations. So, what you guys are doing for planning within your own city, or incentivizing that type of development, I would be supportive of any of that. If there's anything we can do at the county to help Centralia with any of that, please let us know. We're happy to jump in on the conversation and open to creative solutions. So,
well, I think that's something that we need to hear too. I know there's a legislation in Olympia, there always is, regarding infill and UGA and all of that. But one of the issues that we've had with the council over the last couple of years is, do we build infrastructure that leads to the county property, but then it only benefits the county in terms of their tax base and doesn't come back to benefit us directly? Those are, I think, some of the conversations that we've had openly in session before about the building of sewers. And so do you want to comment on that a little bit? I mean, we've had those discussions out towards Reynolds before.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I think if we're going to have any progress towards getting new housing stock, we're going to have to work with you, because that is a lot of the most developable property is out in the UGA, because trying to place these projects, we're largely built out when you get down into the core of the city. So I'm very, very intrigued to hear that, and we have a couple of projects actually in mind that I think I even kind of alluded to that with you at one point. Said, hey, if we can push this sewer line out here, we can open up a whole area. So I'd be real interested to have that conversation with you.
We have the same issue in the county. We have county roads that are out in the urban growth area, and it's like, how much investment do we put on those when, they could be annexed? And I think, some of that is, you have a responsibility to the taxpayers that are whatever part of your jurisdiction, and so does the city. But, if we're going to solve this problem, we really kind of have to put that aside and come up with some creative solutions here. So I'm not speaking for the county commission, but I do think that they are interested in whatever we can come up with for creative solutions. They usually are. So
I kind of want to just kind of say something, maybe a little bit redirection here, because I think infrastructure is important, of course, but infrastructure is talking about development for people that have money and they want to buy houses, which is great. And unless there's some kind of housing that the developers can be encouraged, either through tax incentives or whatever, to build housing for people that are homeless that can get in, I think that's a discussion for another time. We only have 20 minutes left. I'd certainly like to hear from some people in the public, if anybody's here would like to speak, to kind of see the interaction between people out there, what they're feeling is going on with the services that we provide. It seems great, but how's it working? What are the requests? Is there anything we should be talking about more directly in the small amount of time that we're really going to address getting people in homes and getting them off the street and the help they need.
Well, and we're going to have further workshops. Really, this was to figure out what the county's plan was, and we'll be reaching out to the public and having more directed with the public as well. I mean, I would encourage, we're going to have these discussions. I mean, this is not going to be the last workshop we're going to have, and I think we want to start developing action plans too for organizations. Is there a sign-up sheet going around, or yeah? And I would encourage you to get your information on that sheet, because I think that's really important. So, yeah.
I kind of have a question. I keep hearing a lot about affordable housing, and I'm not quite sure I understand what is that. I think back to when I was younger, it was called the projects, and they built like tract housing or something very low income for people to live in. And so if you provide affordable housing to people who have no money, I'm just not sure how this whole thing is supposed to work out on actually getting help to these people, and where they're drawing the line of, okay, what income level do you have to be under to get into the affordable housing? So say you set it, let's use an example of $900. If you make less than $900 a month, you get this affordable housing at very cheap. So the people that are out there struggling making $950 a month, they're going to go, oh, if I can just shed $55 a month, I can fit into affordable housing. This is where I'm really confused, and I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but I'm not seeing guidelines on affordable housing. And I think we need some really strict guidelines or what it means.
So, I'll share that I've often been confused, and I think the term affordable housing is used in a lot of different ways by different people. Another term that gets used a lot is low-income housing. And so low-income housing I'm more familiar with as far as it having the specific financial guidelines. And when we talked about our TBRA program, or the programs that use the Washington Housing Trust Fund, that's low-income housing, meaning that there is somebody getting a tax incentive to loan the money, and the project has a lifespan of like 40 years, where the tenant is only expected to pay up to 30%, and I could be slightly off on some of these, is expected to pay 30% of their income, and that generally these people that get approved are on fixed income, so they're on Social Security at $900 a month, $300 of it goes to rent, and that's kind of how those low-income projects are described. Affordable housing, and I'm sorry I wasn't prepared to go into kind of specifics if Commerce has those, how they're using that definition. But I think that it's an affordable amount for someone that's in the median income for the community.
I work with the Washington Northern Housing Alliance. Maybe you know me, I can answer each one of your questions to the dot with facts and paperwork for you.
Thanks, Lisa.
JP,
oh, sorry.
Go question. I'm wondering what the data is on the number of people that are considered homeless. I know that's usually a point in time count. Is the trending on that going up? Is it staying steady? And what's the forecast?
So our numbers on that have been increasing, not dramatically.
Any guess on like the percent increase?
So last year it was, and I don't have that in front of me, I believe it was 135, and this year we're looking at about 150 in our point in time count. We've worked to make that as inviting for people to come in and attend as we can, but Commerce will often say, take your point in time count and multiply it by 3, and you're probably getting a little closer. So that would be 450. If you look at the description of what homeless is by the McKinney-Vento, the federal description as far as homeless insecurity, we have upwards of 600 homeless youth in Lewis County. Now, that could be someone that has a place to stay the night before, but that maybe they're doubled up. That maybe they're sleeping on someone's couch, or they're doing a week-by-week rental. And so they would be qualifying for those services. So the number of how many individuals we're seeing is increasing, and I think kind of anecdotally people can feel that. But when you see homelessness, when you see blue tarps, when you see people walking on the street who you know don't have a place to sleep, that's a very small part of the population of homeless in a community. And oftentimes it's the people that are unseen that is the most challenging to serve, because it's not something a lot of people want to raise their hand and say they're homeless.
And could you speak to the concern that I hear frequently that if we provide excellent services in addressing this problem, that it will attract more people to come here and avail themselves of those services?
That's a concern that, when people in my position get together and talk about this, every community hears. And that's a concern that every community has. Overwhelmingly, the population that we're working to serve is from Lewis County, even those high visibility individuals. And I think it's a concern that people have, like I said, across the board, and it shouldn't just be dismissed. It needs to be understood, because when you develop a program and maybe there is more visibility, there's an impact to that. And for neighbors, you've got to work closely with them to mitigate those. But I do think that overwhelmingly we are working to serve Lewis County people, and I just think we're best when we do that, and I think that there are ways to do that.
Thank you.
So I think this is, I'm no expert in this field at all, but I think this is where we really, JP spoke to this earlier, this is where we really can use what we have for community values to serve the people who are from this community, because they grew up here. They understand what those community values are. And even though they're in crisis, they are going to be attracted to those values. Other people from other places who are just looking for a handout, for lack of a better term, are not going to be attracted to those kinds of things when we do attach some level of accountability, or we have an expectation that people are looking for an exit strategy from their current situation. This is where I think we have an opportunity to make sure, number one, that we're being successful in the things that we're doing, and number two, that we're focused on the people who want the outcomes that we want, which is getting people out of their situation.
Can you talk a little bit about the success, I guess that's a leading question, of drug court? I mean, I've always been impressed with the relationship between drug court and reliable enterprises. I would love to see a greater emphasis on drug court, mental health court, veterans court. I just think that when you have folks who want, I mean, there's so many success stories, but when folks really want to get out and they fight for it, they're really successful. And it's been amazing for our community.
Drug court's great. I was the drug court manager for about a year, and it was an incredible position, and one that I left a clinical career to do and to come work for the county. Drug court is incredibly successful, yes, because of those accountability measures, and again, the opportunity that's connected to it. When I first started was when we first got the partnership with Reliable. I remember the first time people coming into the program, as soon as you joined, you had a place to stay. And when you have a place to stay, and and your treatment is paid for, and we tell you your job is to recover, get clean, turn your life around, this is your shot. And what I would tell people when they were joining drug court is, counties don't have hearts, they have budgets. And we just put our money where our mouth is for you. Don't let us down. And that means a lot to people when they know their community saying, hey, we're committed to you, we're paying for you, we want to see it happen. And that's why drug court's successful. There's a lot of human interaction that goes into that. The people that are involved with that program are incredible. Judge Toynbee's incredible. Officer Dickey's incredible. Jan. That team that I worked with was just exceptional. And that's because that accountability and that opportunity are connected.
Is the expansion of those programs maybe part of the greater plan? I mean, and it might not necessarily be part of the specific money, but part of the reach out to the community and say, how can we all help? How can they all help to make that?
If you got a call for increasing therapeutic courts, I'd love to hear you talk to John Meyer about it, because he's a fan of them too. And we've worked to create a mental health court together. We worked on the drug court together. But right now, it's a challenging time. I mean, you see that everyone's pressed to do more, and we've got to prioritize those types of interventions. I think that when you look at the success of those programs, the data that shows the difference between helping someone turn their life around in drug court and them taking that prison sentence and probably the next 3 or 4 after that without any assistance, the cost differentials are just incredible. I think it's 23 to 1 in some validated studies, peer-reviewed studies around therapeutic court interventions like that. And I think that's something that, you know, our group of graduates, they go and train the state. They go up to state conferences. Our alumni group at drug court is second to none in the state of Washington. So yeah, let's increase therapeutic courts all the way. Sounds great.
I just recently attended a meeting where one of the cities said, because of course this is on everybody's mind nationwide, we're not unique. Anyway, they had gotten together, the city, say Centralia, Chehalis, and Lewis County, had gotten together and formed one position of one person that was a mental, like crisis person, I guess you'd say. And they sent them out in the field, whereas other places can't go to the people have to come to them. They actually sent this person out into the situations, and they started working with the homeless, and they were having tremendous success with it, getting the people to services and getting their lives turned around, because they themselves could go approach into these camps or wherever the people were. And I don't know if anybody has ever thought of something like that. A one person, if they could make that kind of difference, would be great.
I do it every day for the last 3 years now.
So we do have outreach services, and those are kind of going out into the camps and making that contact is something we do. We could be doing much more, and we want to. Mm-hmm. Also, kind of those co-located crisis mental health workers with law enforcement is a model that's been successful in a lot of places. And when you talk about therapeutic courts, I think there's a real way to blend those together. And I joked as a mental health worker that it's almost easier sometimes to make a law enforcement officer a counselor than a counselor a law enforcement officer, because they have to learn all those tricks in law enforcement oftentimes to be successful. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in getting services out of buildings. I think it's definitely needs to be a part of what we do. And when we think about our homeless count, that's really a place where we see the better we can do that, the better we're going to know who's there. And we want a by-name list of every homeless person in Lewis County, which means we want people proactively going out there. And in the next RFP process, we're going to be really honing in on how we tailor contracts to make sure that's what we're asking for and that's what we're looking for.
When somebody is a drug court candidate, they're going through the process, and they have children, do the children receive counseling services? I see Richard Stride back there with Cascade Community Health, and he's done a lot in the schools, but that early intervention and prevention to stop intergenerational poverty and issues is important. So are they receiving the services? And if not, would that be part of the plan?
You know, I think for therapeutic courts, you're doing case management and hopefully connecting children with services. One thing I should mention is the Centralia Coalition, which is a drug and alcohol prevention and wellness coalition. We need people involved in that. I went to a meeting last month in the Centralia Middle School Library, and there's about 4 of us, and 2 of them were, paid to be there. And so, we need community involvement. And we need to intensely wrap around the children in our community to show them that we're listening and we care. That's one way to do it. As far as making that, so much is hard to put into a contract that someone signs. And so in therapeutic courts, to make those kind of requirements, as you know, judges are very picky about not mandating things they can't enforce. So it's hard, but I know those case managers are always working to connect those children with those services and are often successful. Cascade's a fantastic place. We have many providers in our community doing great work with children and families.
And so we've got about 5 or 6 minutes. So I wanted to talk about maybe some action plans, some of the things that the county would like to do. I'd like to schedule another workshop, but I would also like to be a lot less talk and a lot more action. And so is there something that we can begin working on, in addition to connecting everybody and getting everybody on board? What should cities be looking at? What's the county looking at doing? I know the RFP's out. Do you need help with that? Where can we insert our expertise?
Peter, just if I may, before you move to action, I want to acknowledge one perspective that we may not have really discussed tonight. And I'm looking out here, it's really nice to see the group, because I can see we have people from the faith community, we have advocacy folks, we have government folks, we have social services, nonprofits. I'm sure we have people with lived experience, or folks that you know that have lived experience of homelessness. I know we also have business owners here, and I really appreciated the emphasis tonight on caring for folks who are in crisis. I always want us to have that compassion when we are working in government, and it's been enriching for me to hear about what's happening. I also know that the folks that I talk to are really struggling with their own hearts, because many people are not in crisis. They're wanting to go through their lives, and they're finding that they are impacted as well by being able to live, work, and play, earn a living, have a home that they like, and use the public areas. And I think we don't want to cast aside one perspective or the other, but governing a city means that we need to be serving the needs of all people. And I don't know if you want to speak to that directly, but it's something I just wanted to acknowledge.
I would love to. So we met a couple weeks ago with the Chamber of Commerce, and we also met with the property owner around Walmart, who had raised some concerns around some impact to business there. And we are working on, with Housing Resource Center and our outreach services, and hope to really improve this in the next RFP process, a way for business owners and other people in the community to call and connect those people they're seeing with the services. It's I think so often for social services, it's like, we're better if we're not seen. We're better if we're out of the way. And that time's over, and we do need to work with businesses to say, okay, we've all got a seat at the table here, and if it's going to work, we're all going to have to pull the rope at the same time in the same direction, because otherwise you get the two factions pulling in different directions. The problem gets worse, and we end up just not working well together. So there will be more meetings with business going forward. I'm happy. Me and Eric, I believe, are going later this month to a chamber luncheon to talk about this more. And that's a strength, being able to bring in business and have them be a part of solution. I think that, and being able to say, we're going to do that, I think that's fairly unique in this capacity as well.
So to your point, Peter, about action plan, I mean, this is one that I sat right there in a meeting and watched JP come up with this on the fly as we were having a conversation with the director of the chamber, and it was amazing. And so I just want to give a little bit of kudos here to JP. I'm not sure that we could find a better guy for the job here in Lewis County, but I did find that process to be very beneficial to us, because I think when we hear the stories and when we hear the specific problems, that whether it's a business person or whether it's a faith person or anyone else in the community that has these experiences, JP and his staff have the expertise to understand how we can use the dollars. And so when we can connect those stories of what people are experiencing and what they think they need with how we can spend the money, I think that's where we really come up with those action plans and those solutions. So I'm excited to watch JP work, because he's very good at what he does.
JP, so what are you thinking? So what's your plan? No. So what do you think some next items should be? I mean, I agree with Kelly. I mean, you and I have sat down and talked about mobile crisis units to be able to come to different businesses when they're having acute issues, and maybe even some long-term, and some other issues. But for a next step, I mean, you're talking to the community. What do you think the next step could or should be?
I think that going forward in our conversations with the business community, tying those in with our conversations with the faith-based community, figure out how do we really leverage the caring kind of volunteer capacity to its full extent. How do we respond to some fiscal opportunities that are likely going to come down from the state government, and do that in a way that's in line with community value and in line with something that can gain broad support. And so I think this current legislature is going to be interesting to see what opportunities we might apply for that are in line with that community value, that can have that broad support and that can have that business support. And then to go forward with that and to see how do we bring then the faith-based into it. So I wish it was a quicker, shorter answer to that, but it means more meetings and it means more conversations. But I think that this is a great start, and it's not the start. We're working on it, in full speed right now. Understand, we have one person. We try to keep our costs very low at the county in doing this work. We have one person doing this, and myself, who's supervising all of social services directly, as well as being the director of public health and social services. So we're at capacity and we're moving as fast as we can. But right now what you're doing is you're saying, let's bring people in. So if everyone that signs up is willing to continue to stay involved, that's a really great start. And if we have a next meeting and we put together an agenda where we can answer some more specific questions, and if people want to bring those out, if they want to send those in, if you guys have a place where they can do that, happy to keep going. But I think it's about, let's look at what our resources are, and then let's see if we can put them all together at the same place at the same time to do something.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And there is that list going around, and I would encourage you to put your name and email. We'll be reaching out. We'll have another workshop where we will start addressing some of those concerns and start having some folks who represent the business community, faith-based, social health services, municipalities, start talking to us and maybe make it more interactive. I thought this was a good first start by the turnout. I think everyone would agree. We wanted to hear, what's the plan? What are we thinking? What are we talking about? Often these meetings create more questions than answers. But that's good because it's open and we're talking about it. This is a public meeting. We only had it from 6 to 7 is what the announcement is. I encourage you to stay around and ask questions. And don't leave without signing your name and your email so that we can contact you, reach out about the next workshop, and that you can submit maybe some questions, or we'll reach out to you with a process for how you can reach out to us and ask some questions that we may be able to bring up at the next workshop. So with that, I will pass that back to you.
So this is adjourned.
We got a few more handouts up here if anybody wants one. You can also go to the Public Health and Social Services website and get some of this information as well.